Hello there, this is Simon DJ Demon D from Precision Piezo. What we're going to do here is just to do a quicker version of the assembly videos that are already on YouTube. This is for the Piezo20 Z Probe module, because we're now selling on the site that's precisionpiezo.co.uk, a self-assembly version which is considerably less expensive because it takes a lot less time for me to put it together. But this video will show you how to assemble your Piezo20 module, and basically covers all the steps involved. So effectively you get a kit of printed parts. This is the screw mount version, which means that the module itself will screw to your printer via two M3 screws, and then the hot end will be attached via a clamp, groove mount clamp. So essentially that's the screw mount module, and I've got a groove mount module. This was one that I sort of made earlier. Essentially this fixes to your printer using the existing groove mount, and the clearance between the groove mount and the module has been designed to fit underneath a Titan extruder and be quite snug, quite flush against it. The only difference is with the groove mount when it comes to assembly is that the top part, instead of being one piece, actually comes in two pieces, and you just put them together, and there are two little location dots on the front so that you can orientate them the right way round. Okay, so the first thing I do with these modules, this has come straight off the printer. Essentially you've got your lower part, your top part, your clamp, and then this little key fob which essentially also doubles up as a drilling guide. Essentially the hole spacing is the same as the 25mm spacing on here, so if you want to put that onto your printer and drill the holes to mount the module onto the printer, you can use that, or you can put it on your keyring. Okay, so the first thing to do is to make sure that all the holes are the right size. All the holes on the clamp and on this part usually come out exactly right. On the lower part, essentially we've got 4 holes which attach the upper and lower parts together, and 2 holes here which attach the PCB. This is a 2.8mm drill bit, so essentially we're just going to go through the 4 holes here just to make sure that they are 2.8mm. They're not normally very far off. Use a little bit more RPM when you drill these ones so that you don't split the part along the layers. Essentially once you've drilled them, what I'll also do is to turn the unit over. Essentially this part prints on top of a little support piece, but it's not perfectly supported, so you'll sometimes find there are a few little loose strands of plastic here, and I just scrape them off with a needle file. It doesn't matter that its undersurface is slightly rough, it's not important. Essentially just look inside the groove mount here and just make sure that that's relatively clear, and it makes sense to take a hot end heat zinc and just to push it in and just make sure it sits all the way into the centre. If not, it might take a little bit of filing in there just to clean that space out. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is to attach the clamp. Essentially the clamp just slides in here once your hot end is on, but obviously it needs some bolts to hold it in. Now there are 2 holes, one here on the side and the other one here on this side, which essentially are for brass inserts. You'll find in the kit that you're given some little brass inserts. Essentially they look like so. What we need to do to fit those is essentially just take a long M3 bolt, push it through with the clamp in place, attach the brass insert, just turn a couple of twists of thread on here, and then take a torch or a lighter or something like that, heat it for about 5 or 6 seconds. Obviously don't touch the hot end. Once it's nice and hot, all you have to do is pull it back through and it will just sink into the plastic there. Just stop when it's level with the outside of the unit like that. If you've got the screw mount version, you need a couple of brass inserts for your screw mount, so essentially these two holes here are where the brass inserts go. So if we just take another M3 screw there, just push it through here, essentially pop your brass insert on. Same process, but it doesn't have to go through so much plastic, so you can probably get away with heating it for just maybe 3 or 4 seconds instead. And then pull it through and it will just melt its way nicely into the plastic there. What I tend to do with this one now is to essentially just stand it up and just make sure that the M3 screw is straight in both kind of X and Y, so that when you go to screw it to your printer, the screw will thread properly. They don't need a lot of time to cool, so you can actually unscrew that one and then move on and do the other one quite quickly. With the lower part, this one needs time to cool because the heat in this M3 screw will slightly soften the plastic inside the unit. That kind of creates a thread, which is useful, but essentially just let that one cool before you try and undo it. Otherwise, instead of having a thread, you just have a sort of a slightly messy messy path for the M3 screw to take when you go to do it up, and you'll have to cut through a lot of the material there. So again, just make sure that that's straight, give it a few seconds to cool down, and then you can unscrew it. And effectively what you now have is your two brass inserts, which won't turn obviously when you put the screws through from the other side. What I will often do with this unit is when it prints, I mean I don't print them with support, but you'll find there's just a little bit of rough plastic in each of the 4 holes here. Just take a little file or something and just get rid of that little bit of rough plastic in there, so that it doesn't get in the way when you're assembling it. It only takes a little spin around, and then I often find it's worth just pushing something through that has at least a sort of 3.5mm diameter, just to make sure that when the screws are attached, this part can still slide up and down, which enables the unit to function. So I mean that part's ready to be used now. This part should be cool. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get these bolts out, so I just grab hold of them with a nice big sort of pipe grip and then just twist them off. Once you've done that, pop one of the cheese head slotted M3x20 bolts in there. Saves time obviously if you use an electric screwdriver. And just do that one up. Don't do it up really tight, because we don't want to sort of distort the unit while we're assembling it. Just do it up so that it's held in place, and then pop the other the M3 bolt through the other side for your final brass insert here. And we'll just heat that. Again, about 5 or 6 seconds. If you've got a reasonably good sort of micro torch, you might not need so much if you've got a more powerful torch. And then essentially just to pull it through, and again make sure it just sort of melts into the plastic so that it's well held in. Again, leave that one to cool before trying to take it out. Okay, so piezo disc, you've got a 20mm Murata 7BB piezo disc. We will have pre-drilled a hole into the piezo disc. Essentially this needs to have some connectors crimped onto it. They have short flexible leads. On the end of the lead is a little tiny bit of tinned wire, and what I tend to do with these is just fold a little loop over so that they're folded over back on themselves. They just crimp better that way. So essentially just fold those over, and then you'll have supplied in the kit some standard kind of dupont crimps. Just snap them off the little support sort of that they come on. We usually give you a spare one in case you mess it up. Okay, so take your crimping tool, just make sure you insert your crimp and that it goes in relatively straight. Click it a couple of clicks so that it's held, and then all you have to do is stick your wire in, crimp it and pop it off, and there it is, it's crimped on. So we'll just do the same with the other one. Okay, so that's crimped on there. All we need to do now is just to take a 2-pin dupont housing, which again you have supplied in the kit. Just insert them both in. I mean, I tend to find when mine crimp, they don't quite grip the cable perfectly. Although you may have a slightly better crimper than me, so all I do is just to sort of just push them in, and just make sure that when you push them in, that they're the right way round. And when you push them in, they'll click, and the two little black tabs here and here will be flat. They won't be sticking up. Okay, so that's your piezo disc ready. What we can do now is just to take the M3 screw out of this part of the module. Again, take the other 20mm M3 screw and just pop it through there. I mean, of course, if you want to attach your hot end to it at this stage, you can. And again, we'll just do that up so that it's loosely attached. Now, what you've got also is some 4 countersunk 16mm M3 screws. Essentially, on both of the units, there are location dots on the front edge of the upper part. And essentially those location dots face towards the two little turrets where the PCB is attached. That's essentially the front. So essentially hold these two pieces together. Take our 4 screws and we'll just position them through the top part into the lower part. Just turn them on a couple of turns of thread. Make sure they go in straight. I mean, they are threading into the plastic, but it's relatively thick. It's not a problem for them to do that. And then basically tighten them down, not all the way, but just tighten them down until you almost just reach the point where the countersink begins. So essentially just tighten all 4 of them down. That basically still gives you enough room to open the unit to put the piezo disc in. So we'll just tighten the 4 of them down like that. And of course I'm sort of speeding through this because I build these all the time, but feel free to pause the video and stop and check each stage. Now you can still sort of pull the unit apart slightly now so that you've got space to sort of insert the piezo disc into the gap in between. Now if you turn it round so that you're facing the front of the unit, essentially what you'll see here is you'll see a little notch inside there. Now that's actually for the solder pad on the piezo disc, so that it doesn't get crushed when you put the unit together. So I'm actually just going to unscrew one of those. I've just done it up a little tiny bit too tight. Okay, let's just wind that back a little bit. Okay, so now your piezo disc goes in with the ceramic part facing downwards, and inside the upper part is a little recess which the piezo disc will fit into. So we'll just pop it into there, and then we'll just sort of squeeze the module together. And then if we look underneath, you see that the hole doesn't quite line up. So I tend to just get a little bit of ptfe tube and just ensure that the ptfe tube can go through the unit, and then just push the thing closed with your fingers, making sure that the positive lead solder pad is just in that little groove in the lower part. Essentially now I do the rest by hand, essentially just holding the unit together and just doing up the screws at the 4 corners. Do them up diagonally, so essentially they sort of pivot around one another diagonally. And just gradually do them up Then have a little look at the unit and see if it's level. You can just give it a little feel to see where it's loose. So wherever it's loose, just do up the 2 diagonal screws. And the whole unit will gradually get more and more firm. And you want it to be sort of reasonably firm so that it's not moving around. What that's doing is actually just preloading the piezo disc, so it's just bending it very slightly in the middle. So you can have a little feel at the corners and just see where you need to tighten. Have a look to make sure that it's straight. So we're nearly there now, that's pretty good. We'll maybe just put a half a turn on each of them just to tension it up a little bit. Okay, so that's now complete. So now we've got the piezo disc, you can get your ptfe tube through the middle for your filament. The module's put together there. Now we take the PCB. So on the back of the PCB you'll find that there are 2 pins here, 2 header pins. Essentially the black lead from the piezo disc goes in the upper one. So just slide that on now. Okay. So effectively you've got your positive lead on the lower of the 2. If you find after you've assembled it's the wrong way round, you just slide it off and turn it over. Okay, so just tuck the wire in underneath there, and then essentially you need your 2 6mm M3 screws, and they now just go through the PCB. And I find that it's best just to put one on halfway and then pop the other one on. And then once you've got them both on, you can do them up. You don't need to do it very tight, just enough so that the PCB isn't sort of wobbling around. Okay. So now you've got your PCB attached, your piezo disc connected to it, so this unit's sort of pretty much ready to go now. So now you would attach this unit to your printer using the 2 M3 screws there, and if you wish you can use your drilling guide or make a carriage or effector to fit it to. Your hot end will go in here. Take the clamp off, put the hot end in, screw the hot end in so that it's quite tight and won't rotate in the clamp. It's a better clamp than most hot groove mounts on most printers, so you know it'll hold the hot end very rigidly. Once you've done that, essentially you've got your standard end stop cable. There is a slight difference between a standard end stop cable and this, and that is that the VCC, the positive lead here, is at this end of the plug. Normally it would go red, black, ground, and then green, which is signal. But what we've done is we've actually have it slightly the other way around. It's positive signal and then ground. So if you're making your own lead, all you have to do is just swap the signal and ground leads over from the standard configuration. Just peel back the little tabs, pull the crimps out, swap them over, and just push the tabs back on to make sure they're attached. So that then attaches with the red positive where it says V+, the green to signal, and the black to ground. The other end of this obviously goes to one of your N-stop or Z-probe connectors on your printer. We provide both a 3-pin for sort of ramps and similar, and a 4-pin for things like duet. You know, make sure that you put these crimps into these the right way round, that the tabs are folded down so that they stay in when you insert the plug, and make sure that they are the right or pin out for your controller board. Essentially that's very, very important. So what I've got here is I've just got a lead which is connected to a printer so that we can power it up. Essentially just insert it there, and you'll see that the red LED comes on, which is the power LED, and if we give it a little squeeze you can see the blue LED now flashes when we apply pressure to the unit. Sometimes helps just to give it a little tap on the table and you can see the blue LED flashes. Now this one isn't very, very sensitive at the moment, so in order to make it more sensitive we've got an adjuster here on the left which is called VR2. All we have to do is just to get hold of that, turn it, until the blue light comes on, and then just turn it back the other way until it just goes out, like so. And now if we give it a squeeze, it's quite a bit more sensitive. That will now trigger with, you know, relatively light force. Okay.